What we're thinking right now is that it's likely to go actually to the defense industry. You had, Trump request a $1.5 trillion defense budget. This is a 50% increase over the prior year, the largest year over year increase since the Korean War as a percent of GDP. So while we're not saying this is wartime, it does indicate how involved we are on so many geopolitical fronts. And that's really where the economic multiplier is likely to come from the fiscal side in 2026.
Monica, it's an election year yet again. What does that typically mean for markets here? Because oftentimes in these midterm elections, you get a change in controls in various houses of Congress. How do you play that?
So midterm election years, markets tend to underperform, and it's the year after that you get the outperformance, and that's because folks are waiting to see, right, that outcome. Typically, what you'll get is if we end up with a split, gridlock Congress in 2027, we're going to be off to the races, right? Because nothing changes and policy is stable. But right now we're in that policy uncertainty mode. The one thing we do know we're going to get is that focus on affordability and the Trump administration keeping the midterms as part of every single conversation that they have. And one of those things is we're going to be seeing it in housing, trying to control energy costs, as well as making other aspects of spending and the consumer affordable.
But if I get out my Rolodex, you're one of the best people to talk to about well-intentioned politicians, quote, trying to control. Is there any history that politicians can control Paul Sweeney's electric bill?
I think it's challenging to do, but one of the things that they're looking to essentially alleviate the burden is to essentially move from this idea that there's an energy transition happening to an energy addition, and trying to make the public-private partnership component on the muni side more accessible and easier for municipal bonds to come to market in the public power space, giving the municipals and the local governments more power to have over their energy sources. So this is a long-term play. It's not going to be overnight. And for the midterms, it's likely to be more messaging on energy costs versus an actual reduction.
Monica, I guess just this week we saw some of the volatility come back into the market that maybe we saw early last year. So it relates to tariffs, this time associated with Greenland. It seems to have tampered down here, but do we have to start thinking about some of this tariff stuff and crosswinds, headwinds for the markets?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've, long held is that the, tariff environment is here to stay. Even if IEEPA is struck down by the Supreme Court, which we think it will be, the administration is doing all the legwork in the background to set up certain backfills, if you will. So Section 232, Section 201, there's tons, right, of different categories of trade law that they're exploring to try to essentially create a patchwork to get us to that final place. The other option that people aren't talking about with IEEPA is that we could end up in a gray zone where you get a nuanced carve out on tariffs. Right. So for example, you could say, okay, we could justify China because you can argue that we're in an economic Cold War with them,
right?
But you can't for Malaysia. And so then that even makes it an easier case for supporting that federal debt and deficit and the budget.
If they lose, is Alexis going to get a tariff rebate check for the bananas she bought 90 days ago?
So, I'm waiting.
All right. So this is going to come full circle to my first comment about defense. So if we're thinking about that significant amount of fiscal spending that could be coming for these defense and geopolitical priorities, in our view, it really lowers the likelihood that you're going to get an appetite for a rebate check for your tariff.
Paul,
so we think that's highly unlikely. Highly unlikely you're going to get that check, but rather they're going to try to come at the affordable piece through other measures.
That's kind of it. I mean, affordability has kind of really come into the top of the discussion pile here, given some of the elections we saw in, New Jersey and Virginia and some others. Is that something that you expect the administration to focus on?
Absolutely. And one of the things that's important, though, is that even though Trump's, proposing, say, a 10% cap on credit card interest, it's going to take an act of Congress to move a lot of this along, which is helpful for members of Congress that are, running. We don't know exactly what's viable because there's still a lot of infighting and sort of, setting the table for 2026. Right. But we're going to see more and more of this discussion because it is going to be a winning category on that campaign trail.